Hello, my name is Richard O'Sullivan. I'm the CEO of Soundcam UK, distributing sound cams and bionic systems for the company CAE Systems GmbH from Germany in the UK, so United Kingdom and Ireland. And I'd like to take you through some introductory stuff today, assuming that you've just received your Soundcam and what's in the box, and then we get into how to operate it. So I'm going to cut this into a few different videos, but this is the first one to say, now you are unpacking it, what should you have in the box and what does it all, how do you assemble it, how do you make it work. Okay, so let's get started. So here's the Soundcam, and there's a slightly different model with a later housing which looks almost identical, but this is basically the Soundcam. It's sitting in the box like this when you get it. There's a few paper plastic bags on top of it and a few notices. There's an important notice that's on top of it about the batteries. I'll just mention that. So the battery inside is a rechargeable battery, a lithium ion rechargeable battery from Texas Instruments, and a special charging circuit and charger from Texas Instruments as well. Please only use our charger with it. And that's the highest quality on the market today, so it's sure to give you no trouble at all if you treat it properly. With all lithium batteries, there is a problem if they're deeply discharged, and normally a lithium battery charging system, although it might say 1% left, is actually more like 10 or 15% left, but you're not allowed to use the last 10 or 15%, because if they actually discharge below that level, then what happens is the circuitry in the charging system says, oh, this battery is deeply discharged, I'm not allowed to recharge it, I'll just not do anything with it. So you can plug it in and it won't charge up, basically. And that is to save overheating and damage and fire and all the rest that happened in the whole Samsung affair with their mobile phones. So nowadays, and I think it was before, but Samsung probably cut it too fine with their settings on it, I don't know, but basically they've got all these safeguards in, and so the thing that one customer did, which caused a problem, and he needed a new battery, was he left it in the case after he'd used it with only a very low amount of charge. I don't know what it was, but then he put it away for some weeks, and when he took it out, they do discharge slowly, even in the case, even when you do nothing to them. Any battery does that. So it went below this threshold level, and the charging system says, sorry, it's unsafe, I can't do anything with that, and it wouldn't work. So he needed to send it to us and get a new battery fitted. So just a warning, when you put your Soundcam back in the cupboard, don't leave it with a low level of battery. You don't know, it depends. If you're using it every day, it probably doesn't matter, but if you're using it, if you don't know when you're next going to use it, then it's especially important to maybe give it at least 50% charge. Even fully charging, to be on the safe side, won't do any harm. So give it a good charge before you put it in the cupboard. Right, so what have we got in the box? We've got the Soundcam itself, which we'll get into in detail in a minute. We've got some headphones, which we'll get into as well. There's the headphone jack we can see quite nicely from this position of looking underneath the Soundcam, which is a little mini jack. Here's a few little tools that come with the tripod that's underneath the Soundcam at the moment, which I'll show. Well, I don't need to show you the tools, they're just for tightening it up, but I'll show you the tripod. Here's the charger, and there's a mains lead for it, and that's about it. The tripod's underneath. So if I take this out now, you can see we've got the Soundcam itself. There's two grips that you use to hold it, so on each side, so it's quite comfortable in your hands. You can walk along with it dangling on one arm. If you have to walk through a factory or something, you don't need the tripod. It doesn't have to be used with a tripod. My arms are going to get tired if I do a long video, so I might put it on the tripod in a minute. But okay, so what we've got 64 microphones on the front plate. We've got a camera in the middle. We've got 4 very bright LEDs, so don't shine them in anyone's eyes. And you've got little pads on the front. See these rubber pads? So that you can basically lay it on a table like that, and it doesn't do any damage to the microphones. Right, so what else do we need to watch out for with the Soundcam? Actually, it's made to be robust, so it can take rain, it can take splashes of water, it shouldn't be immersed in water. There's an IP number in the spec that I keep forgetting what it is, but it basically can't be immersed or subjected to high pressure jets to clean it, but you can wipe it down, you can do what you like with it basically, except as long as you're careful. So the microphones though here, They do say don't put your finger up, you can't hardly get your finger in to touch them, but don't stick anything sharp in there and poke around with it. But apart from that, use a brush or use a cloth or something to clean it. The camera lens needs cleaning like any other camera lens sometimes, especially if it gets in the rain. So basically, let's have a look at it now. What have we got on the back of the unit? We've actually got a charging port here underneath this rubber cover, which we can stick around there so we can get at it. We've got an on-off switch at the top right, which if we hold that switch, if we press it quickly, we'll just see the charging level, which is 3 out of 4 on this at the bottom here, and that will go off after a second. We can do that at any time, even when it's running. And if we hold it for a longer time, now that light starts to flash at the top here, and that's how you turn it on. So in about 30 seconds on the screen here, and we'll be rocking and rolling. So let's have a look. Here we've got, while we're waiting, we've got a network port for connecting a network cable, and you can operate it remotely by PC. We'll get into that later. Here is a card slot, or a USB slot I should say, where you can put a USB stick in and transfer the data on and off directly from the Soundcam. That's about it. There's nothing apart from, okay, there's 8 buttons which are user configurable. So this is the screen that you get when you've turned on the machine, and as you can see, there are various areas. The big lensy looking area is the one we'll do in a moment when we go through to take recordings, but there's a geary sort of setup area here on the right with the 3 gear wheels, which takes you into a whole setup screen with lots of different options there. There's a peoply one here with some heads and shoulders, which isn't to do with removing dandruff like Head and Shoulders. Okay, crappy joke. The peoply one is to do with set up profiles, which you can name after people, or I rather name them after situations. There's an on-off button, and there's a data recall. So that button on here that I'm indicating with the mouse will recall any of these files that are in our default directory that we've recorded before. So we could click on them, hit that data button, and bam, we've got some old file that I recorded somewhere at some time, and we can play with that data. So we X back out to this screen where we ended up when we started up, so that way you could quickly look through different files that you recorded earlier. Go to the people icon because I mentioned that before, and it's all to do with, I've got mine in German, so I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll pop back into the gear icon, we'll go into the languages, and we'll switch that to English. I think we might have to restart for that as well, which is a bit inconvenient because my window disappears. Okay, now I have to resize it quickly. So there we go. You've seen how to change the language in case you ended up in German as well. Now if we go into the people profile, it says it all in English. Choose profile, delete profile, load profile, blah blah blah, simple controls. So okay, I haven't got any profiles on here, but if I had, this drop down would show me the names of them, so you could save a profile which had all the right settings for, say, looking for leaks in your compressed air system. So you'd set a fairly high frequency in that case, and the distance would be fairly far away, and blah blah blah. And then you'd save that, and then the next guy could just load that up and say, right, I'm going to measure compressed air leaks, and off we go. Right, there's an important button here which I'll mention later. If you get into trouble and it won't save any more data, even though the disk is very big and it doesn't normally get full up very quickly, this restore defaults button will help you get it working again. It usually happens to me when I've deleted, I've moved from the internal disk to the SSD, from the internal SSD to the stick. I've moved my default directory, and then it can't find it anymore to save the files, and then it says, disk is full, but it isn't really. So this restore defaults will restore all the default locations and settings on your machine if it's not doing what you think it should. Right, so the gear button shows us the main settings area, and there's a sort of, supposed to be a speedo, I think, a tacho or whatever, and it's all to do with the speed of operation here on the top. So you've got a standard 50 frames a second operation, you've got a high speed at 100 frames a second. Now this is for the beam calculation. So for the color blobs, how often are they going to be calculated per second, the sound sources, which are overlaid on your camera picture, your video picture. And then you've got two resolutions to choose from, which have their resulting frames per second speeds that you can see. So the camera resolution here and speed is to do with the pure video picture, just like any old video camera, whereas this beam speed is to do with what we call the beam picture, which is the sound sources shown by coloured areas overlaid on the video. We'll see all that in a minute. So changing date and time we could do, except we're not connected to any hardware, that's why it's greyed out on mine, but normally you could change those values, press the tick and it would set the date and time and give you a confirmation dialog. But if you've only changed these ones above, the camera settings, then you don't need to press the tick button. It's a little bit confusing, but that's the way it works, and you just go out with an X. So back in here, the first one we were just in, the second one is for transferring, as it implies, from the internal SSD to an external stick, which I just showed you where to insert it. If we go into that, I can't do it because I haven't gone in. Oh yes, I can. Okay, so it's opening my Windows file manager, so that's not very helpful. But basically you'll see a simple two-pane dialog where on the left is the contents of the SSD. You select a directory or a file, and on the right you select a destination on your stick, which once you've inserted it will also show up, and you can go through into a appropriate directory and then select the files on the left, press the one of the buttons in the middle that transfers it. That's very straightforward, and you'll manage that without me showing you that on the screen. This one here, the I button, gives you information about the Soundcam that's connected, except I'm not connected to anything. It would give me lots of information about software levels and blah 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 that you don't need to understand. I think you have to press this button actually to get it up, and then this bottom button with the circles around the snake eating himself, this will allow you to install an update, a firmware update, which it will then ask you where is it, and it will tell you you've got to have the thing plugged in and stuff like that. But it's very simple. So you load the software update, download it from our portal on the web and put it onto your stick, then transfer it via stick, which also of course works both ways, I didn't mention that, back onto the SSD somewhere, and then you'd press this button here, go in and press this button to locate it, and off you go, and it doesn't take long. So that's that one, and we did the languages because I needed to. So that's languages and also keyboard type down the bottom as well, what sort of keyboard you have, layout you have. And then the next button bottom left here is the data. Here we have a default data directory, which, because I'm actually on my PC rather than on the thing, it's giving me my PC path, but there it would show whatever path you've set up, so you can click on that, except it doesn't want to work for some reason. Oh, there we go. And you can see where you are at the moment. In my Watson directory, I've got a load of subdirectories that I've also made. I can go anywhere I like and go up a level with this one to the highest level, whatever, and then I can add a directory with this one, give it a name, and then add it, and you'd see it there, and then I could select that new directory, whichever one it would be, and then hit the tick button, and that would become my new default directory. So I can't really show you that with this PC setup. But the measurement series, when you take measurements, you can actually give a prefix here as well. So I'll put in test. It's made for the touch screen, that's why I'm using it like that. Name of measurement series test, and the file name then becomes a subdirectory of test with the prefix of test, and then a year, month, date, hour, minute, second, time and date stamp, which will happen automatically when you try and save data, which we'll go to in a bit. That was data, and then this next button would take you into the dialog if I had a Soundcam connected for programming the rubber buttons, which you can use if you're not using a touch screen. You don't want to use a touch screen if you've got gloves on or something. Then you can program the rubber buttons to start and stop the test and do other things, turn the lights on, stuff like that. So that's it. I think the bottom right one is a very new addition. It's the triggering dialog, which only works if you have the latest software, and I'm not even sure it's released yet. This is a beta version, but it will be released soon if it isn't released already. And you can enable the trigger. You can set a pre-trigger time of several seconds and a post-trigger time of several seconds or less, which means before and after you measure the before and after the trigger is activated by an increasing level, it will take video for that long before and that long afterwards, basically. Now you can trigger within a sound spectrum, which then you can define here by setting different blobs anywhere in the frequency scale. Set another one somewhere. Whoops, there's another one. And you can make up a line like this. I think you have to click away and then get another one on. And then you can put those, see we're going across 6 kilohertz to 16 roughly is what I've selected. And I'm just saying if the levels come and cross that blue line, start making a recording, and it will trigger every time they go above that line. Bam, 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 anywhere in that defined frequency range. You can set up lots more of those. So, and the level of that particular one is 30 dBs, but whenever it crosses that line, it'll start recording. Or you can set to trigger in a beam picture, which is the color picture, the color blob on the screen. When that is showing a level of above 50 dBs in this case, set it to what you like, of course, then start the recording, trigger the recording with a pre and post trigger time. You have to obviously click that to enable the trigger, else it won't be active, so it won't trigger at all. But if that's enabled and you go into the record screen, then it will automatically, and you press the recording active, it will then wait for a trigger before it starts to save any data, and then it will automatically keep saving files every time it gets triggered until the disk gets full or you turn it off again. So that's triggering, and it's a very powerful feature. And that's all the setup screen that we've gone through now. The only thing that's left actually is either to turn it on or off this way. If you press that, it'll say, are you sure? Yes, no. We'll say no because we don't want to turn it off. And the alternative is to go into the measuring dialog by hitting that big lens picture.